As U.S. President Donald Trump escalates his threats to take over Greenland, Canada is looking north, thinking more than ever about sovereignty and security. Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew is reminding Canadians of a provincial portal that already exists.
There's only one port and one rail line that feeds the Arctic, and that would be absolutely essential for us to maintain sovereignty in Canada's Arctic, and that is at Churchill, and that is in Manitoba.
Kinew says the Port of Churchill, located on Hudson Bay in northern Manitoba, would be Canada's, quote, only hope if Trump follows through with annexing Greenland.
With that, just recently, a signing ceremony took place in Toronto at one of the world's largest mining conferences. Two organizations placed their names on a framework agreement that, on paper, connects a small port town on Hudson Bay in northern Manitoba to one of the most powerful logistics networks in Europe. What that agreement actually represents is something much larger, a direct Arctic shipping corridor between Western Canada and the European Union that bypasses the continental American trade infrastructure that Canadian exports have, run through for generations. Arctic Gateway Group and Port of Antwerp-Bruges International signed a new agreement to enable opportunities for trade, collaboration, investment, and long-term partnership between Canada's Port of Churchill and the Port of Antwerp-Bruges, one of Europe's largest and most diversified ports. The agreement establishes a framework for cooperation in port development, intermodal transportation, and the identification of new cargo streams between Western Canada and Europe. Priority sectors include critical minerals, energy products, fertilizer feedstock, containers, and agricultural commodities. The Port of Churchill is Canada's only deep-water Arctic port connected to the continental rail network. It sits on the southwestern shore of Hudson Bay, linked to the Canadian prairies by the Hudson Bay Railway, a 1,300-kilometer line running north from the pass, Manitoba. That geography is the core of the strategic argument. Churchill's position on Hudson Bay places it on one of the shortest maritime routes from the Canadian interior to northern Europe. Grain, potash, critical minerals, and energy products moving from Saskatchewan and Alberta through Churchill to European markets travel a distance substantially shorter than the same cargo routed through southern Canadian or American Gulf Coast ports. The problem is that Churchill has historically operated as a seasonal grain export facility with a shipping season of approximately 4 months per year, constrained by Hudson Bay ice conditions. The port and railway have required sustained federal investment simply to maintain operational capacity. Since 2018, the Government of Canada has invested over $320 million to support the Arctic Gateway Group in maintaining and developing the Hudson Bay Railway and the Port of Churchill. In March 2025, Ottawa committed a further 5-year, $175 million package to maintain rail service and begin pre-development work at the port. The Government of Manitoba has also committed $140.2 million in capital upgrades to the corridor since 2022. Those are maintenance investments. What the Antwerp-Bruges agreement signals is a shift towards something more ambitious, a multi-billion-dollar expansion that would transform Churchill into a year-round Arctic shipping gateway. Arctic Gateway Group is studying the operational requirements for year-round shipping through Hudson Bay in partnership with Montreal-based maritime transport company FedNav. That study is examining what combination of ice-breaking capability, port infrastructure upgrades, and rail improvements would be required to extend Churchill's operating season from 4 months toward 12. The Port of Antwerp-Bruges processed nearly 300 million tons of cargo in 2025, making it the second largest port in the European Union and one of the largest in the world. It functions as a major European gateway for energy, bulk commodities, and containers. Connecting Churchill to Antwerp-Bruges connects the Canadian prairies directly into that distribution network, a logistics chain that reaches industrial customers across Germany, France, the Netherlands, and deeper into Central and Eastern Europe. Europe and the European Union are accelerating efforts to secure reliable, sustainable sources of critical raw materials, energy, and agricultural inputs essential to our industrial base and clean energy transition, said Christophe Watershoot, CEO of the Port of Antwerp-Bruges International. Canada is a trusted partner, and the Port of Churchill is a strategic Arctic gateway with significant long-term potential for the exchange of valuable resources between Europe, Manitoba, and the Canadian West. The European motivation is direct and documented. The EU's Critical Raw Materials Act of 2024 and Clean Industry Deal of 2025 both establish legal and policy frameworks requiring European industry to secure diversified supply chains for the materials that battery manufacturing, renewable energy infrastructure, aerospace, and defense production depend on. Russia's invasion of Ukraine disrupted agricultural commodity flows from two of the world's largest grain exporters simultaneously. European buyers have been actively restructuring supply relationships across food, energy, and industrial materials since 2022. Canada, with its political stability, rule of law, and resource base spanning grain, potash, critical minerals, and energy, fits the profile of the diversified supplier Europe is building toward. The Arctic Gateway Group is a proudly Indigenous and community-owned Manitoba company. The involvement of First Nations communities as owners and operators of the port and railway is a specific feature of the corridor that distinguishes it from conventional infrastructure projects. In January 2026, former AFN National Chief Ovide Mercredi was appointed to the Arctic Gateway Group Board of Directors. The structure of the project embeds Indigenous ownership into the governance of what is being positioned as a nationally strategic piece of infrastructure. The corridor faces real challenges that the Antwerp-Bruges Agreement does not resolve on its own. Year-round Arctic shipping through Hudson Bay requires ice-breaking capability that does not currently exist at the scale the expanded trade volumes would demand. The Hudson Bay Railway faces ongoing permafrost and maintenance challenges that have historically produced service disruptions. Infrastructure investment at Churchill, at the scale required to support a genuine year-round export corridor for grain, critical minerals, and energy products, runs into billions of dollars, not hundreds of millions. There are also environmental concerns that have intensified as the scope of Churchill expansion proposals has grown. Plans circulating in the development community include potential pipeline infrastructure connecting Churchill to Western Canadian energy production. Environmental organizations and researchers have documented concerns about the ecological sensitivity of the Hudson Bay watershed and the cumulative effects of major industrial development in the region. The Narwhal, a Canadian environmental publication, has reported on pipeline proposals at Churchill and the questions they raise about industrial expansion in northern ecosystems. The Port of Churchill is still at a stage where we're building it back up and potentially building it even bigger than it was ever before, said Chris Avery, CEO of Arctic Gateway Group. The federal and Manitoba governments have structured their investments around the Hudson Bay corridor as a component of Canada's broader Arctic sovereignty strategy. Transport Canada's ministerial briefing materials describe the Hudson Bay Railway and Port of Churchill as integral to Canada's Arctic sovereignty and as a strategic gateway for exports and resupply to Nunavut. Those sovereignty dimensions have become more prominent in federal discourse as the United States has intensified its interest in Arctic territory, including the annexation rhetoric directed at Greenland and the broader American posture toward Arctic governance. The Antwerp-Bruges Agreement is a framework, not a completed project. The parties will assess infrastructure, alignment, logistics, services, and joint business development pathways. Studies on year-round shipping viability remain ongoing. The capital required for the full expansion has not been committed. But the formal partnership between Canada's only Arctic deepwater port and the second largest port in the European Union is a documented institutional step toward a trade corridor that did not exist in any operational form 12 months ago.